Stop moving around.
See,
The principal's here.
it's 8:30. We call Sawyer County Finance Committee meeting to order. Ask the clerk to call the roll, please.
Ron Kinsley,
Here.
John Ringheimer,
Here.
Stacy Hessel,
Here.
Tom Duffy,
Here.
Dale Schleter.
Here. Thank you. Let the record indicate we have a forum for you. Aye.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Certification compliance with open meeting laws.
This meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statute.
Thank you. Number 5, meeting agenda. The agenda is set. Number 6, public comment. Ms. Zilmer.
Linda Zilmer, 902 Holly Hill Lane, Birchwood, Edgewater property owner. At a number of previous meetings, I have explained the situation that exists down in Edgewater as far as ambulance service. And yet it seems to me when more like newcomers, like administration talks about what they believe the situation is, I don't think that reflects reality. So I look forward to a joint meeting where the ambulance director from Birchwood can meet with the Sawyer County ambulance director. At public safety this month, I asked that the reporting that they get reports on the number of runs per month and year to date by town, the response times. There are a number of actually in staffing at each of the locations, because and what we're hearing down in Edgewater or things aren't staffed, and it's, you know, I know you're short people, but that reflects in service. So I had a call, or actually I saw somebody on Monday who I believe to be accurate in how the story was told, is that on the day after election, there was a need for an ambulance in Sand Lake. And Sand Lake Town Hall is right there in Stone Lake. And it took 40 minutes for an ambulance to arrive, and it came all the way from Ojibwa. You know, these are life changing or life-ending events, and it doesn't matter what level of service you have if somebody doesn't get to you in time. So it's one thing to look at the financials, and I don't think the county's in any position to be doing transports to make money. Between public safety and this committee, please take a look at what is budgeted staffing versus actual, because if you're not staffing and yet continue to budget high numbers but not provide the service, where is that money going? So it's two-pronged: actual responses and then also what's being charged for ambulance. And I do believe Edgewater should get a credit or something. It's not setting a precedent because Edgewater was never part of Sawyer County ambulance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody online?
Nobody online.
Number 7, approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Anybody have any questions regarding the minutes?
Make the motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Ringheimer, second by Ms. Hessel to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 8, financial department report. Welcome.
All right, well, the first thing we'll talk about is sales tax. Andy, can you bring?
Yep.
Stuff. Got January, February, March in the books, and each month set a record high for the month. Even last year's, which were also record highs. The cumulative, when I project out with the spreadsheet that I kind of explained what I used last month, we're still at over 3 million, and we budgeted 2.6, so that's still a healthy amount. Hopefully it keeps up. There's no guarantee. It's going by formulas that worked really well last year, using it again this year. So any questions on that? The budget update is actually 2023 budget update. Figured since we're a quarter into it, we should start looking at that. Some of the revenues are lagging a little bit. Looking back last year, that looks fairly common. One thing I didn't have when I produced this report is we hadn't pushed out the property taxes to each department. I did that since I ran this report, so I'll give you those updated numbers. The only expenses that are really running high is that other programs, which is Department 33 and the general fund. And that's, the libraries, Democratic Transit, Senior Resource Center, all those partner organizations, and we give them all their money early. So that's why those are running high. And the funny thing is I've been here 9 months now. I've worked with the 2021 budget, commissioned the audit, 2022 budget, which is what I was working on when I got here. Established a 2023 budget, and now we're already looking at 2024 as I put out this CIP for 2024. So in 9 months, I've worked with 4 fiscal years, which is kind of fascinating. And then looking at the actual financials on the revenue side with the updated property sales or property tax in there, we are at 29% for the year for the general total, which is the Department 00. So more than the 13% I have in the report. And then carrying on, the rest of the revenues are all pretty standard for this time of year. The revenue totals for Fund 100 then are at 27%. So that's, we're at a quarter of the year. That's what they should be. On the expense side, we're running a little bit under. All the departments are in good shape, except for, like I said, Department 33 is a little high because of what I mentioned. For the year, we're at 22% on the expense side. Looking at human services, that's one where revenues lagging a little bit. They're very grant driven. Grants always have a little lag when you receive them. In fact, we're still waiting for one final grant on 22 to close that year out. But right now the revenues are at 15%, expenses are at 19%. We are showing on the books about a $1.2 million operating deficit right now, but that will catch up once those revenues start coming in. Highway department on the revenue side, we're right at 25%, and expenses are at 18%. Spent a couple days out at the highway, closing out the books a couple of weeks ago, and learned some fascinating stuff. For instance, each time it snows, it's about $23,000. So that's brutal budget winter for the highway department. And we're probably dipped pretty well into this year already. Hopefully we don't get early snow next year. Any questions on the 23 budget update? C, there are no CIP purchases in March to report on. I know some stuff's in the works, but nothing came in March. D is OPEB report. I'll spend a little time on this. I don't know how familiar the finance committee is with this. OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits. Typically, it had been the anticipated future costs, liability, so all the years in the future of current staff's post-employment benefits, which generally prior to Act 10 had been health insurance, was paid usually from age 57 to Medicare eligibility. After Act 10, most municipalities and schools have gotten away from the health insurance, but almost every entity grandfathered people, and so their liability went from, it was an escalating out of control cost that everybody knew was unaffordable. We really had to do anything with it prior to Act 10. After Act 10, entities had some flexibility to do something. So you saw a big drop. And then there might be a minor increase, but usually it was kind of a steady decline because the grandfather people were aging out of the system. So you were not left with a lot remaining. Sawyer County, I don't know the history of prior to Act 10, what there was in place. I know now people can stay on our health insurance if they were hired prior to 2015, but it's at their own cost. So it's not paid anymore. So really our OPEB liability is what's called Losing the term. Implicit rate. Implicit rate is what they figure out actuarially, what your health insurance costs having retirees on versus what it would if they were done. So they figure the older you get, the more it costs for healthcare. So I think we have 3 retirees who are on, again, we don't pay anything for them. But what the actuarial firm was saying, because those 3 people are still on your insurance, your premiums are this much higher than they weren't on there. So looking at this, if you guys can see that at all. The one thing I want to point out, it looks like it kind of goes up and down. The report is done every other year. So really what I'm going to draw you to is the odd years, because that's the year that the report is actually done. The subsequent year is what they anticipate from the data they had the year prior when they did the report for 2 years. Well, every year we've had a credit between what they anticipated and what actually happened. And the case is our insurance is more costly than they can go out on the exchange now. So there are very few people that choose to stay on our insurance plan at their own cost. They go somewhere else. So what they do is they take actuarial tables and say, well, this percentage of people are likely to stay on. We just start seeing that happen. So that's why there's always a correction when we do the actual report. But you can see we've had a good drop in what our OPEB liability is. If you look at the ending liability in 17, I think is when we would have seen the effects of the change in 15. So that's why there was quite a drop after that. So our liability, I think at the end of 21 is just over 600,000. At the end of 15, it was almost 700,000. So it's a good drop down, and then from 17, it's down from almost 1.5 million. So it's it's built into our insurance premiums. We don't actually see a cost. We're not paying a check for that. And again, it's just an actuarial number. The people who have retired on our plan might be the healthiest ones we have, and they're actually helping the cost, but they go by strictly actuarial tables. Yes.
You mentioned Act 10. If Act 10 were to go away, does this become a concern at all, or no?
What we have in our favor is this is our policy in books now. So that would have to be changed through negotiations of that and and everything. They can't, I wouldn't think they can restore the past.
No, I know in the past, I mean,
It would
going
have to be
forward, right?
negotiated back, yeah.
Going forward, it would be possibly a negative from what you were saying now.
Potentially, but again, it would all have to be negotiated. It can't just be handed back. It would have to be our local people requesting it and giving up something else to do.
So the Supreme Court overturns Act 10.
It would depend if they overturned it to as it was prior or
Okay.
overturned
Or what it-
you have bargaining rights.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It would restore the ability to bargain. So they'd have to, the union would have to reform and people have to join and negotiate a contract. And
It would bankrupt everything. if it
Yeah.
was restored to 2009.
it wouldn't restore like the contracts that were in place.
But if you
2009.
restored it, in what you said, they reform, I mean, we're going towards that again, then I guess, over time.
Yeah, you could end up, well, the county or municipalities would still have to negotiate with the unions and put the benefits that were in place back in, back in. They'd
Right,
have the ability to do that.
right. Okay, thanks.
All right, then moving on to the deck issue, this is something we've talked a little bit about before, actually. Got some numbers here to look at. So again, what our bond council proposed at the end of last year versus how we had been doing the capital improvement plan in the past was to put it up, combine it with the remaining debt issue for courthouse construction. And then Actually, later he said, well, let's just put it out and do the 24 CIP at the same time. And the reason for doing that is to save on issuance costs for that issue. So it doesn't cost incrementally a lot more to have the best do a whole other that issue cost. So that's why we're doing it this way. The proposal at this point, which is not set in stone at all, would be a $4 million debt issue that would cover the 23 CIP, which came to $1,367,307. I put in a plug number of 1.5 million for 24 CIP. If you recall, we did that state trust fund debt issue for that property we purchased in December. It would make sense to roll that into here. We can pay it off sooner. Potentially get a lower rate than what we're paying right now on that, but paying it off sooner would be the main benefit. The state changed a practice this year. I don't think any law or statute changed. You used to be able to borrow from that, paid off right away. What they told our bond councils are really not going to allow that anymore. They're going by the letter of the law saying you have to pay out according to the schedule. So that does change things. The goofy thing is you can refinance it and pay it off right away, but you can't prepay it off. So that's why we would take a look at doing that. If you recall, we did in the budget, put the property and casualty insurance in here. That's $250,000, and then to get to the 4 million, the remaining courthouse is 551,000. That's not the intent of the county board. They don't to borrow that much. The board did get authority to do a resolution for 2 million. Subsequently, wanted to and did a resolution to use the ARPA money for it. That's about 1.6. So that does leave a gap of about 400,000. Then we added about 50,000 a couple months ago for the upgrades in the jail camera and security. So it's about 100,000 over. It's basically to get it to the 4 million. We'll know a little more once the CIP comes in, which is due at the end of the month. I did that about 2 months early, but that was to get information to do this debt issue. May make sense to put it up a little bit. The rates did go up again about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Most people are anticipating that they're going to go down by the summer. In fact, I had a meeting with our bond council for about an hour, and we talked a lot about that. And a lot of people are thinking they're going to go down, so it might make sense to put it off when we can float these costs through our general fund money, and we wish you did that, so we're not in trouble that way. Looking at the rest of this sheet, it would be a moderate increase on the levy this year. And then the other thing I want to draw your attention to is the pink column there and then all the numbers are highlighted in yellow. That would be CIPs moving forward from 25 on. If you recall last month, I mentioned we would like to get to a place where we're borrowing that money, paying it off right away instead of over multiple years like has been past practice. This model does represent doing that. So we will reduce the interest we'll be paying and just get on more of an easy schedule. Easier to plan. And the effect on the overall levy rate, you can see it's the second to the last column there. And this is all based on 1% growth in the equalized value, which we all know we far exceeded that recently. The 1% would basically represent what our anticipated new construction growth would be. So it's a conservative look to come up with a levy rate. Any questions?
Interesting the way you break it down. Thank you.
Actually, a lot of this comes right from, this is my own spreadsheet, so I can play with numbers and it automatically calculates all. All right, moving on to 10. The investment report. February is obviously another very strong month. 67,000 in interest earned for the month, 132 for the year. The rates on the very right, you can see are really strong. We do have most of the stuff for March now. We're waiting on, I think, like the LifeQuest stake statement, otherwise I couldn't get that completed. And the rates are even up again, and we took in about 88,000 in March of interest. So that is becoming very good news for our budget. Which is good, because some of the other revenues have slowed down. We're not seeing a lot of well, registered views that slowed down. There's many signals of it in construction requests. So. There's many transfers of title. Any questions on this? And then 11, ambulance billing update. We're now looking through February. I did discover an error I made in December and January. Remember I said that the calls were way up? Well, what I picked the wrong number from the report I grabbed from LifeQuest in December and January. I picked the total. The total includes the routes plus mileage. Mileage is already included in the routes, so it was doubling that. So correcting that made the numbers look a lot more in line with what we've seen. If you want to go down to the first graph there. This is the aging report, and you can see it's down. What's outstanding is down quite a bit from last month. When I analyze something like this, what I'm going to focus a lot on is what percentage is current of that, because obviously we want current, not stuff that's hanging out there. And the last 2 months are quite an increase over the previous 3 months. I mean, what is current versus what's further outstanding. So that's very good news. You get down too much deeper than that, and that was when LifeQuest had just taken over, and they didn't have anything aged out that far, so the current is kind of over exaggerated. So I'm looking more at the last 3 to 4 months to get a good gauge on how we are doing with our current versus longer outstanding billings, and that's showing good progress. The next one is the average calls per month per year. And this brings, and again, we're actually crossing over years now. So when I'm looking at data, we're crossing over because I'm adding new one each month until we get to a full year of we've been with LifeQuest. So this brings it back down in line, adjusting December and January number of calls back. And this it reflects what we've seen where we just aren't getting the calls we used to. Or no. Well, that's probably 25% decrease over last year. But then the next slide is showing what we bill. And we did adjust billing, I believe, for 2022. So even though calls are way down, our actual amount of billing isn't down significantly from the year over 12 months prior. Still down a little bit from the 3-year average. But we're making a little bit of headway there. News is getting better. If we go to the next slide, this is what we've collected per year. And this shows we're actually just above the prior 12 months cycle. So calls are down, billings a little bit down, but the collections are on par or even up a little bit compared to last year. And even over the last 24 months, we're right in line So that's showing some strength. And then the next slide is percent collected per month for the year. And again, it's 12 months, not a calendar year. And this is really strong. So this is starting to show that we're doing well with switch to LifeQuest, as we are now over the prior 3-year average. We're actually also at the highest point of any of the previous 3 years with their percentage of collections. So that's probably the best news we're seeing. And each month we add data with LifeQuest, we're getting a more balanced year-to-year look. So that's encouraging. And then the next slide, just a double graph showing the amount per call billed and collected by month, and then averaged over the 12-month cycle. And again, we're billing more and collecting more per call. So that's a reflection of both our increased price per call and also that the collecting we're getting a little higher percentage. Any questions on any of those builders? Then the last slide is where ambulance is at as far as net income. And again, this slide does not have property tax allocation. I've added that now. With that, our revenue totals are at 25%, expenses at 16%. So we're actually right now at a net profit of 264,000. So that's really strong right now too. Personnel costs are at 19%, which is more than they've been. It should be right around 27-25%. But we've added some of those staffing goals that we've had, so that's encouraging. Staffing and full, I'm sure Rose will talk about this at the next one, but we're doing better in positions. It hasn't been as much of a struggle.
Have we had trouble filling shifts?
Not that, well, yes, to the extent that I mean, you don't see in this numbers, we've been at quite a bit of overtime to keep those shifts covered. We're short, particularly in the paramedic area. So all of our full-time paramedics are working some overtime, some working extreme amounts of overtime to cover the paramedic shifts. I'm not aware though of any like ambulances, like our 2 main ambulance stations being down at all. We're keeping those covered.
The paramedics, are they working in other counties or other places also?
Pretty much all of our paramedics work somewhere else.
How do we pay compared to the other places?
Some of the others, some were comparable, some were low on. We're definitely not setting the market. So we just have been looking a little bit closer at that because of the amount of overtime that we are paying to maybe make an adjustment on the paramedic side. It seems like we're pretty competitive for the AEMTs and basics, but we might be a little bit below on the paramedics again.
Thank you.
And that does potentially affect our
Yeah.
transports, because you have to have a
Right.
paramedic on the transport.
Are we doing a lot of transports right now?
No.
What else you got, Mike?
That's all I've got on my questions.
You do a nice job breaking it down for us. Thank you. Yes,
You said we're doing so much better with LifeQuest rather than the previous. Claims. People that we hired. Did we just hire bad companies there? Or?
I don't think so.
No, Integrity was the other billing company, and they went through an ownership change during the tenure that we were with them. And I think actually 2 ownership changes, and through those changes in ownership, the follow-up and the collections weren't as good as they were initially.
And John did say that LifeQuest is really easy to work with. He sends the run list and then I take it from there.
Yep. I would say our access to data too is much better.
There's a lot of data.
There's a much better dashboard. to work with.
Yes,
And our transports down because we don't have paramedics to make the transport.
That'd be part of it, and our availability isn't consistent. So the places that want transports have other vendors they can work with who are a little more consistent in being able to respond. And there's more to that story, but that'd be one thing. And that marketplace has changed a little bit, where like who Hayward uses, they have a little different, a little bit different service. And then we also did a lot of transports for Ladysmith. And now that that's under Marshall Clinic ownership, they have their own ambulance service. So they try to use theirs first before they call us. But they have Lakeview out of Rice Lake that they own, so they'll do most of their, as many of their transports as they can before they call an outside vendor.
thank you. Letter B,
So this has been a discussion in here at this committee and also public safety. So the update from this month's public safety. This is the request from the town of Edgewater to in some shape or form cover their cost to the Birchwood ambulance service. They have a separate contract that they pay to have that service that township. Initially, the request was for us not to levy the town of Edgewater for the countywide ambulance service. There is not a way to do that. We levy all the taxpayers the same for the county services. So the follow-up request was that we levy as we have been for the ambulance, and then we pay either credit back, either pay to the township or pay directly to the Birchwood ambulance service their contract fee, and I believe it's $50,000 they pay annually. So rough numbers, the ambulance levy for the town of Edgewater's portion of our countywide ambulance levy is $80,000. So we would pay the 50 to the Birchwood. So we've done looking into whether we can do that or not. And the short answer is we think there's a way to legally, there's a way to do that. And then it becomes a question if you would want to do that. And the difficulty or issue right now, doing it like now or agreeing to do it now, is we budget for our ambulance service during the budget process, and we levy the amount based on that budget. If we were to pay the $50,000 to the town of Edgewater or to Birchwood, doesn't reduce our cost by that amount. So potentially we're shorting our budget for this year. And I guess the other issue is just the idea that if you open the door to this type of arrangement, there's potentially other townships that may or municipalities that say they don't use another service and would want us to pay them for their service. Or the example I've used is like a township that has their own town police department and doesn't get as much service out of a sheriff's department, that we cover part of that township's police department cost. So at the public safety though, this discussion regarding the town of Edgewater did bring up some other just operational issues as to how calls are dispatched to the township. Does our county ambulance respond? The town of Edgewater is licensed as a basic service. So even if they're going to calls, we still want our ambulance dispatched so that if there's a need for an intercept, our paramedic ambulance can intercept with them and take the patient the rest of the way and start providing care, a higher level of care immediately. So we've ironed out some of those issues. It has resulted in a conversation between our ambulance director and the Birchwood ambulance service. But I think we still need to clean up some more of that. So the next step for us is to arrange a meeting between the township, the ambulance, Birchwood ambulance, our ambulance, and myself to try to iron out the rest of those issues. But if you want to support the town of Edgewater and route monies to them or to their contract with Birchwood, I'd recommend you consider it as part of the budget process. So that way it would be added into the ambulance levy in the 2024 budget.
Yes,
Just to clarify, so Edgewater has their own ambulance service.
They-
And so they're saying that they don't utilize, that they're paying taxes. Why did they make their own ambulance service? They don't like the
just
current service?
It's Birchwood, yeah. The Birchwood ambulance gets other partners, Edgewater, town of Wilson in Russ County, and I don't know how many other townships in Washburn or Barron.
Because it's border.
It's kind of I think they used to call it maybe the Four Corners service
Okay.
even. But it goes back a lot of years that they have been a member of or have signed on with the Birchwood for service.
And you're saying that. So in essence, they're saying they wouldn't even. Just so I clarify, so we would not need to provide ambulance service to them if we did this?
Right now, and we need to formalize this, right now, the direction from the township is to dispatch the Birchwood ambulance for calls within the township. But we do operate a countywide service, so if there's a call in the township, we still want to be. Sawyer County still wants to be dispatched. And then if Birchwood gets there first, then they call us off. If they need paramedic level care, we can continue and intercept with their ambulance and take the patient on at that point.
So we do, I don't know, we don't save anything if we. Is there any savings for us?
No,
That's just the cost of 50 grand more to us.
right. Because we're not going to reduce any of our costs.
Right.
By them.
Although they're saying you should. Or we should.
No, I don't, I mean, they're not saying that either, no.
Okay.
They're just saying that they're essentially getting double taxed because they're paying township money to Birchwood, plus the residents pay for the
Like
county.
private schools.
Pretend, I guess that's an example, yeah.
So if money was aside, if the 50,000 was aside, what is the best for those constituents down there? In the town of Edgewater area? Like that's what I think we have to factor in is,
Yeah.
what is the best service for them, not.
That is a good question, and depending on who you are, you probably might have a different answer, because why I say that is there's different schools of thought within ambulance that you want to get somebody there as soon as you can.
It's the same with fire departments. You want the closest fire department to respond.
Right.
And so that's.
And if for example, it's like you get the closest fire department who might only have a little pumper truck, or this fire department takes a little longer, but when they show up, they got a snorkel truck with a lot more capacity. That's the ambulance world. It's you get somebody there with basic service who pretty much throw them in the ambulance and get them somewhere, whereas paramedic level can do IVs, issue pain medicine, do a lot higher level of care, more life-saving type stuff.
Right.
So and I think that's been a good conversation between Birchwood and our service, is that if we're dispatched at the same time, we can get there and intercept with them quicker than if they go to Rice Lake, or generally they're going to intercept with Rice Lake, but we can get in the rig a little quicker with our staff.
Thank you.
They're in the southwest corner of our county. Folks that live in the southeast corner of our county have virtually the same situation. They're a long way away from the nearest responder in Sawyer County ambulance. But we do respond there. And we respond to Birchwood. But the folks in Birchwood have decided they want to also augment the coverage by going with that group that is already been doing it.
Yeah, and
That's pretty much their decision to do that. We've always been under rules that we have to take care of that area. Just like we take care of any other northeast. That's a long way away too. Sawyer County is a big county. And I think it's a very slippery slope we need to avoid.
Schuman.
Thank you. Andy, does the township of Edgewater pay the Birchwood ambulance department a certain amount for some coverage? And is that the $50,000 amount?
Hmm.
And it's probably coming from taxpayer dollars, obviously.
Yeah, it's part of their
So
township.
they're possibly getting dual tax for a service.
But
Yes,
that's their
they are,
choice.
the residents
By
are
choice,
paying,
right.
the residents are paying for 2 ambulance services. One through the county levy, one through the township.
And we have other townships, right, Mr. Schleter, in the same.
This is the only township that has an outside,
Yeah, we have communities in the northeast, southeast that are virtually as far away from our ambulance service as some places out of it. But this community down there decided they wanted to augment the coverage. And that was a decision they made for their own benefit. And now they want us to pay for their decision. I mean, a little problem with that.
and I don't know how long they've been a part of the Birchwood service or paid for that for a long time. It's not something new.
No, it's been a long time.
But remember when we upgraded our ambulance service, we strategically located these ambulance departments and to reach all the county at a certain time frame, right, Ron? You remember that?
We attempted to, yes.
Just to clarify, this might be stupid, but we are mandated to provide that service, so that's why we can't save anything.
Correct. Well, that and like it's, I'm trying to think how to explain it. Even though they have, and they primarily, admittedly, we've looked into the calls, the Birchwood service goes to nearly all the calls in the town of Edgewater. There are very limited times where they're out of service and we still respond down there to cover. But it's like, we have fixed cost on our ambulance service. Taking that township out of the equation we're still gonna have 2 ambulances full-time in Hayward and Ojibwa. Doesn't lower our cost.
Thank you.
And I think, and that's where we're at with the ambulance is really we have, which we can rely on as the 2 full-time staffed rigs in Ojibwa and Hayward. There is an ambulance in Stone Lake, but that's run by volunteers or, call-in. And that would be closer to the town of Edgewater, but that ambulance is not staffed very often.
Wrong, like,
It's a Round Lake.
You stole
I think it's Stone Lake. Yeah.
Because they have they have life flight right there in Stone Lake.
yes, but don't we have another?
Yes, there's another, that's not the only volunteer.
Another consideration would be, let's say we took that 50,000 catered to Edgewater, that would increase our cost by 50,000, which would be spread out among all the other townships in the county. So then every township would be paying for Edgewater service. In that sense.
And I've mentioned this at public safety, things in the ambulance world are getting, there's change because so many small communities, rural areas don't have the volunteer help for their ambulance services. So townships to the north of us lost contracts with providers that were providing it. So they're trying to figure out how to stand up their own service. Bayfield County is in the middle of moving in the direction of establishing a countywide ambulance service so they can have a countywide levy, although they're not going to have county-owned ambulances or county staff. They're going to levy the county and then they're going to distribute the money to I think there's 9 or 10 township, volunteer fire departments or ambulances, but they're going to spread the money out so they can help support those ambulance services. So there's other counties looking at getting into the ambulance business because you just can't rely on volunteer help anymore, call-in help. So things are kind of in flux. There's a couple of reports that just came out again from the state on the crisis and rural fire departments and rural ambulance services. So.
Yes, please make it brief.
Linda Zilmer, and Mr. Schuman wasn't here when I made the public comment. Part of it was in concerns that the discussion I hear around this table do not reflect what's actually happened. So number one, Sawyer County specifically excluded Edgewater when you did your ambulance study and when you looked where to site a local station. It was an ongoing conversation that I had with prior administrator and public comment at committee meetings to reach out to Edgewater. None of their experience or locating the station was considered when Sawyer County moved forward. And also, it's not like the BFC ESD isn't just an entity and that these towns, 6 towns in the village contract with. And in 2008, what they did is instead of contracting with the village of Birchwood for their fire and ambulance departments, they formed an intergovernmental emergency services district. So those towns and the village are an entity, they are a district, it's not just like a contracted service. So I think there is something to consider because yes, they were not under Sawyer County. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes,
Is Mrs. Omer speaking on behalf of the town of Edgewater when she speaks? Just want to be a point of order of clarification of why there's a spot at the table for her to give opinions after public comment.
good point. Thank you. Mr. Buckles.
Yeah, at our last public safety meeting on this Edgewater request. It was brought to Mr. Bremmel and Mr. Alvarado to go back and work with Birchwood and the town of Edgewater and see if where this could go and get a better possible solution. And I think we should be waiting until that comes back so you know more about it. It's a tough situation there, so we need to take a better look at it and wait for them to come back and meet with them and see where this is gonna go and what they can come up with.
Thank you. Do you know when you're meeting with them?
No, actually, John, Mike and I have a meeting this afternoon. That's one of the things we're gonna talk about.
You want any committee members to go with you?
If I was gonna say, if anybody wants to go, let me know and we'll. More than happy to let whoever wants to attend.
We'll see how the chips fall. All right. Number 11, transit bus storage partnership.
I don't recall where this came up, but it's on here, so did do the follow-up. There is a couple of things to relay. So there is at the Radisson Highway Shop a garage that Namacoggin Transit uses for bus storage. I think they actually store a bus or two in there, and then they start the route in that area, I believe. But they pay. We own the garage. They pay $1,000 a year to rent it. And we get that check at the beginning of the year. So I don't remember how this came up or what the concern was, but that's the relationship we have with
I think
them.
some of the questions came up when there's repairs to the building. Who's responsible?
Oh, that I don't know if there has been any repairs, but I didn't look for any further than that. Seems like it's been in place for quite a while. We did look, just the other discussion we had with Namacoggin, just to kind of look into that, is their main garage is on county land. It is not a separate parcel. There is apparently agreement. The county put money into that project, but we're going to look further into it just from an insurance standpoint to make sure that it's on our insurance, but they pay us to insure it.
Any questions regarding that? Move forward, number 12. And that's funding and updates.
Nothing to really update there on the investment report. You saw the balance of the ARPA unspent. We still have quite a bit of the broadband money to distribute as those projects are getting implemented. No more additional opioid money has come in. We don't have any updates on the additional settlement and how much of that we're going to see. And the second distribution of the LATCF funds is expected to come in later this year. No, there's been no change in the balances or any use of those funds.
Questions regarding anybody or anything? Future agenda items? Fourteen correspondence reports, conference and meetings. Is this when we take the tour again?
Yeah, anybody, say anybody that hasn't seen it, we can take a walk through after the meeting or. No
Right.
side.
Last evening, we had Public Works, and after, before we finished the meeting, we took a tour of the building, and that was very nice. And he's a good tour guide.
Just maybe a comment on that. I mentioned this last night and I guess Mike touched on it a little bit. So move-in date is now the week after next. We anticipate being able to use the courtroom on the 24th. It is a couple weeks later because the AV work was not completed in time, and there's a court date or court hearing, or there's a trial next week that cannot be moved, so we have to keep the old courtroom up and running for another week. Everybody's really good to work with. This does push us out 2 weeks later on the start date for remodeling of the old courtroom. So that might move the timeline when the project's gonna be done. The other thing, and I don't have a updated report to share, but our contingency fund is pretty much nil. We're zeroed out, and so we're going into the remodel portion of the project without a contingency fund. So probably we'll hear back on an update on that next month.
So when we restart remodeling the old courtroom, the chances of running into the problems is high. Where we're gonna get the money? That's where we're going with that.
Right.
Keep my 2 cents to myself, but I think that they should have paid us for being overdue, but
Well, some of it, that's legitimate, but the other, some of it is the court system, they've had to juggle around them a lot also. And they've been accommodating for that.
Mm.
So there, I mean, it's two sides of that story. Mr. Schuman,
Chairman, what committee or jurisdiction is gonna track the expenses, savings, efficiency of the second quarter?
I believe that'll be the administrative committee.
It needs to be tracked because people are asking.
yeah,
I'm sure Mr. Alvarado and Michael take care of that. Because as we were all told, we all know it's a story that it will cost nothing else to maintain that building. We all do better than that.
well, also the additional staff is gonna need.
Yeah, I
That
think
we haven't
that's,
factored in, I'm guessing, or possibly we have, but
I don't think it was, but I mean, we've already upped in this year's budget, some maintenance costs for that new addition, just in utilities and maintenance janitorial expense. We increased that in the 23 budget because we knew that was gonna happen. And when you walk, when you take a tour, I mean, you can see how much more square footage is over there that needs to be kept up. Just in that fact alone, it's an increase in expense.
but the state only pays for half of like the court reporter, things of that nature, so that will fall on us too, correct?
The state pays the court reporter.
But only 50%.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but this point, we have one judicial assistant, and I think we're gonna hear a conversation about that once we have a second judge in place.
Yep.
Any efficiencies? Reduction in cost would most likely, if there is any, will be in the jail, being able to move people. I mean, right now, majority of our inmates in the jail are pre-trial, they're waiting. So hopefully we move people through quicker and they do less time in jail. Now, the flip side of that is they often spend so much time in jail now, by the time they go through trial and are sentenced, they're getting credit for time served. So you might have more people than in the jail at post sentence. So you still aren't really expecting to see any real reduction in savings there. I don't know, it's still early, but the trend right now, and maybe it's because of the diversion programs we've started, but our inmate census has been about 20% less since beginning of winter. We're down 70, 75 inmates rather than 95 to 100. So that potentially is some cost savings there.
How about the probation holds? How many are?
There's usually 10 of our inmates.
Mr. Slater,
just briefly, what, are they going to remodel the old courtroom to be?
Another courtroom.
It'll be mirrored of the new one that is built.
Okay, but it's a courtroom now, does it really take that much to change?
It's, yeah, well, what you signed on for is the courtroom will be remodeled, it'll be flipped. So they'll enter in from the other direction. So it'll be across the hall from the new courtroom. It's a smaller footprint. Or it's smaller than the new courtroom, but it also includes offices for the judge, judicial assistant, and potentially the court reporter for the second courtroom as well.
It's a safety it's a safety remodel. It's not just a fancy, like, new stuff in, it's a safety remodel.
Okay,
I want to give kudos to you and the staff because I've been touring government centers and schools since the proposed budget came out, and we are doing really well at Sawyer County. So kudos to you guys.
How are we doing with female jailers?
Good, there's three interviews today. Three females, we've hired on a couple. We have one returning from maternity leave in a month and a half. So if we can hire a couple of these interviews, we'll be back up to where we need to be to bring the female prisoners back.
Yeah, how many is there roughly? 20.
How many? I believe we'd be up to 8 then.
No, inmates,
Oh, inmates?
yeah,
Oh, 75-ish.
women.
Oh, 17s.
I'm
That's
sorry, I
right.
should have asked the question.
Yeah. Yeah, it was up over 20, but yeah, it's, I think we're around 17 right now in Barron.
And great social media, like with the dispatchers, and I mean, I've heard that employees are really impressed with that they're getting highlighted.
Yep.
So I don't know if you saw,
Yeah, if you
they're
saw-
highlighting each department and his dispatcher week this week, and it's very impressive, and I know that the employees have been talking about it positively.
They highlight the new hires when they come on board, and yeah, I think that it's a good impression for the public and for recruitment.
And the next date for labor negotiations is
April 20th. And that will be we've gone into mediation now. So it'll be a mediated session.
we haven't done nothing yet.
No, we haven't.
let's see what,
This is
no action has been taken.
No, it's just completely different than we've ever done it before.
Good luck.
Thanks to the housing for the inmates down in Barron. Do you have any idea what the cost is for transportation for these dudes back and forth?
I don't know if we have that split out of the budget. I mean, we could.
Yeah.
I could ask we can look in the numbers and see if we can find that. But it's not a separate line item that we've tracked.
Last year we spent about $325,000 between the two, 345. And typically we've been between 100 to 120. So if I look at last year versus 3 year, 5 year, 9 year, we're at 3 to 3.5 times what that. So hopefully that turns around, give them some more hires and bring them back here.
It would be cheaper to have new people than to transport, is what you're saying.
It's cheaper than having both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And again, it's similar like to the ambulance service, where just because we have 17 or 20 inmates in Barron, doesn't necessarily reduce our cost to operate the jail, because you have X amount of fixed costs, whether you have 30 people in there or 100 people. And just that small amount of inmates in another county doesn't allow us to really reduce these overall staffing for the jail. Staff numbers remain the same.
When does,
But we could reduce all those transportation costs.
We could reduce that, right?
That's exactly why we have to track this and see.
When does the new judge actually get seated?
August.
There's a really dumb question. I'm asking you. So when the new judge starts and they have inmates come in, and I don't know all the technical terms, but now that's gonna get them faster to that first hearing in the court. And the judge we have presently is gonna cooperate with that and share the load. Because he needed such a shared load because he had such a heavy load.
Yeah, that's the whole idea of having the second judge. Officially, the new judge is seated in August. The current judge has discussed some ways of bringing her in, appointing her as a court commissioner, or some other things that could be done in the interim to start bringing her in a little sooner on some of the work.
And then she would work in his office.
Probably out of the small courtroom, actually.
Thank you. Do we have any say in that? But I guess it's not our pay, or is it?
No. It wouldn't, at least that end of it, if she was to start doing some family court commissioner. That wouldn't affect our budget at all.
I think, Chairman, I think part of the rationale too of a second judge and second courtroom was to give the judge more time with the person in front of them to consider diversion or other things versus incarceration too. I mean, he complained that there was just one right after the other. He didn't have time to even consider.
Yeah, but he postponed most of them and deferred them to another time. He didn't take time to do any of that anyway.
But I know that's what
Yeah.
the rationale was.
I understand that. Thank you. Anybody have anything else? Meeting adjourned. Thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you.
If anybody's